We will begin with Dr. Cliff Smyth, who will be presenting on the topic Exploring a Movement and Awareness Practice, Finding Calm, I Can, and Feelings of Well-Being. Cliff Smyth earned his PhD in mind-body medicine with Saybrook. He now is a member of the core faculty at Saybrook University in the Department of Mind-Body Medicine. He teaches several classes, including movement modalities for wellness. While at Saybrook, he completed certificates in hypnosis as well as integrative wellness coaching. He is a long-term Feldenkrais Method practitioner with 33 years in private practice, using body work to work with people with chronic pain, disability, and trauma. I look forward to his presentation.
Thank you. Let me get my slides showing. Thank you, Don.
And welcome, Cliff.
Yeah, I'm very glad to be here. All right. Okay. All right. So that's made a mess of my screen. Just let's see if I can get people to the side here. There we go. That's it. Good. Well, thank you, everybody, and for coming. And I'm really glad to be here. And I'll be presenting my 2018 dissertation looking at the lived experience of the Feldenkrais method. So let me see if I can get my slides to work. Oh no, something going wrong here. No. Okay, let me try this. So as Dr. Moss said, I've been a practitioner for 33 years. And when I was going into my dissertation, I was really aware that there's a paucity of qualitative research into the method. And even really understanding what phenomena are involved in the method, in the practice. So, today I will present to you my research topic, how that arose, a little bit about the Feldenkrais method, and then quickly go through my research process and questions and method, and then spend some time on the main findings and giving you some nice examples of what people said about their lived experience. Oops. So thinking about, how you get to a research question. So we had this phenomenon in Feldenkrais where practitioners really learn from the writings and the practice about Feldenkrais method as a psychophysical approach to human development. But the method often appears to the public as a way of relieving pain and moving better. And in fact, research from Buchanan et al. In 2014 showed 63% of clients or students came in relation to pain, and then another 10% each for issues due to injuries and surgery or mobility issues or a neurological concern. But then we found that when people had experienced the method for a while, then they started coming to us as practitioners with reports about well-being, resilience, mood shifts, developing a toolkit for dealing with pain and dysfunction and being calmer and kinder to themselves. So that's where I started about thinking about the research question. But just to back up a little bit for all of you and tell you a little bit about Feldenkrais method. So it's named after the inventor, Moshe Feldenkrais, who was an engineer and a scientist, and one of the first people with a black belt in judo, one of the first Europeans with a black belt in judo. And I'm just moving my screen around a little bit more again here. Okay, and he was really interested. He's a lifelong explorer of the role of movement in human development. So the method can be practiced in two modes, right? One called awareness through movement, where people are invited, often to lie on the floor, but sometimes sit and stand and walk, and make exploratory movements and observe themselves as they make the movements. It's like self-observation while moving, or self-learning, in action. So the lessons are like little experiments or explorations, and it can be seen as a form of mindful movement. It has some significant similarities and some significant differences to practices like Alexander technique and Qigong and some kinds of yoga. And these awareness through movement lessons are about an hour. There's around 15 or so variations in most lessons. And there's a body of over 1,000 different lessons exploring really all human functions from rolling to sitting to breathing to the use of the eyes. So that's just a quick introduction to that modality. And then the second modality is functional integration, which is a hands-on mode of practice. The practitioner moves the client. They get to experience movement possibilities through the sensitive and precise touch of the practitioner. And that adds a tactile as well as kinesthetic dimension to sensing how one organizes one's movement and attention. That's the basics. And then you'll get to hear more about the Feldenkrais method from the voices of the people in my study. So this was my research question about the lived experience of the method with adults who were long-term students of the method and who came to the method due to pain and dealing with pain. So the word experience here then has two meanings, right? There's the experience of the method in the whole of their life, and then there's the moment-to-moment experiences of doing the method, and both those kinds of experience came forward in the study. So I'm sorry, there's a oh yeah, there we go. All right. So I chose hermeneutic phenomenology as my approach to the research. Phenomenology focuses on people's experience as it comes to them, their experience of the life and the world and the bodies as they perceive them. So it's a good fit with an experiential learning method. And Feldenkrais himself said, we act on the basis of our perceptions. So if we can alter our perceptions of ourselves, we can alter very fundamental aspects of our lives. The other thing is that phenomenology is really suitable for studying phenomena that are not well described, that are kind of fuzzy and hard to bring into language. And again, where human experience is paramount. And phenomenology provides some good methodological literature on how to gather rich descriptions of people's experience. So it's challenging to gather descriptions of bodily experience, and there's always, to some extent, some level of interpretation, if you like, from the lived experience, the bodily experience into language. And so hermeneutics gives a body of thought and practices about how we interpret language, how we interpret our experience, how we interpret the people who we're studying, what they're saying to us, and the meaning of what they're saying to them of what they're saying to us about their experience, and provides ideas about how to be reflexive about interpreting people's experience and through language. So hermeneutic phenomenology was a good fit for this study of finding out what this practice is about, how people live through it. So for example, one of the things I noticed, if you take utterances as kind of being this kind of smallest units of meaning where somebody describes something, then I found that almost all of them involved them describing a situation or a context, some experience or some felt experience, but almost always that description came with something about their understanding of the experience, the significance of it, the meaning, and the value. So that seemed really consistent with this approach, where rather than being able to just drill down to a little hard concrete piece of experience, people really understood their experience in terms of the situation and in terms of the meaning for them. So how to go about this research? So I had 8 informants, and they were, had these characteristics. About 7 women to 1 man is about consistent with the kinds of people in the San Francisco Bay Area who study Feldenkrais method, and probably across the United States. And one really important characteristic was that they had some substantial experience with the method. And really, these were people who had come dealing with pain or movement dysfunction, distress, but had stayed with the method and adopted the method as a health or life practice. So, still, there we go. So what's important then in this kind of study is that you're not starting with people who have no experience. If you're doing a research trial, you might want to have people with no experience of the intervention so that there's no confounds of previous experience and expectations. But in a study like this, then you want people to have substantial experience of the method, and also through the method, some skill in attending to their bodily experience. And there's really some significant literature about this, arguing for studying phenomena like this, like research into meditation, asking questions, working with people with some really deep experience of the modality that you're studying. So to go about it, I gathered texts. I did an initial semi-structured interview, and then in order to try and get people to bring forth more concrete description of their experience or to remind them of their experience, I got them while we're there to do an awareness through movement lesson from a recording, and they could take notes if they wanted to. And then I did a follow-up interview where their experience of doing Feldenkrais was very fresh. Then I took those texts away and looked for gaps in my understanding, and I did a follow-up interview, and really to clarify my understandings. And then another important part of the process was my reflexive journaling. I'll show you some of my journals in a minute. So just quickly, it can look like this. Each person produced around 30 pages of text. And so there's line by line reading of the text, trying to see what themes emerged, whether they really were themes, working and reworking the text over and over again to try and organize it and find out what it is I thought that they were saying to me about their experience. And from that, I developed individual themes. And then comparing the texts, comparing the themes between people and the text, going back to the texts again and starting to organize the themes and organize the text into these collective reports. And then, as I said, there were my research journals where I reflected on my reading, my thoughts, my assumptions, my understandings, the emerging themes, and that's my research assistant. So how did I present the findings? I'm just going to catch my notes up to what's on the screen. So the findings were presented in terms of some descriptive texts from me, where I describe the themes and introduce the topics, and texts in between these exemplifying texts, these quotes from informants that bring forth the concrete experience. And then within the dissertation, they appeared in 3 ways: in the themes from each of the 8 individuals, combined textual descriptions where I present the themes and variations on the themes of what was present in all of the informants' texts. All of the informants had some experiences that fitted within these meta themes, even if there was variation. And then finally, I developed a structural description looking at some parts of the experience that were essential to the constitution of the experience as a whole, as these people described it to me. There we go. So here's an example of an individual theme. And again, as I said, one of the surprise findings in the study was how important doing imagining movements was for people especially when they came to the method in pain. So we have this quote from this person about, and again, it follows this pattern. They talk about their situation, about imagining the movements, which they call doing movements in their head. And then what it meant to them, that it created a possibility for success and a sense of openness to the process. So you can see there were 11 themes for informed age. I think there are about 18 themes or so for each person. So then I developed these meta themes that were common to all the people. And I will give you some details about them in a moment. But one thing I observed was with phenomenological studies, often you get these long sentences that maybe even a little mundane, but they try and capture what might fit within this description. And particularly here, all of them were involved some kind of activity, learning, right? Making movements, developing, changing, calming, shifting. So all of the categories, all the meta themes involve some kind of doing of something. And rather than in some kinds of qualitative methods, you end up with maybe a keyword or a concept. I think it's interesting that when you read phenomenological studies, often the descriptors are a little bit more of a sentence of what fits into that piece of human experience. So let's have a look at some of the results. Okay. So on meta theme 1, which was about learning to develop awareness, right? We see here the students brought forth some of these really important learning strategies and awarenessing strategies of the Feldenkrais method that they experienced that helped them become aware. So slowing down, making small movements, finding what's easy, reducing the effort, shifting attention from the parts of the body that are in pain to other aspects of the movement. And in the design of the Feldenkrais lessons, they're not designed to have a right or wrong movement. They're really explorations. So that was important for people. Likewise, it's a non-competitive environment and no kind of models of perfection. And at least initially, pretty small movements that are fairly doable for beginners. So, and I really like this quote from one of the participants about this experience. How often do we think about our bodies as just interesting, right? Rather than a problem, rather than painful, something else. The classes are fun because of the curiosity part that comes from exploring how the body works, that can be felt when you're not doing very much, making slow movements, attending to the little things. So the second theme was about improvements in the body, and people reported a whole range of improvements, the kind of things you might expect from movement practice, feeling taller or straighter, more aligned, but also comfortable, but also leading to these bigger themes that are in the title of my talk about senses of well-being, of comfort, an overall sense of reorganization, right? But with it, there's positive feelings. This sense of integration or connection between the parts of the body. And so the last quote here is, it's just this fluidity of movement. It's like everything's together. There's a congruence in the body. There is this ease of movement all through me. So it was an important part of the process for people to identify these kinds of improvements. So then there was the question of how to make use of these awarenesses, right? So they found ways to like check in on themselves that were caring and not judgmental, and just involving this noticing and making observations and exploring through the course of the day. And again, focusing on other parts of bodily experience rather than just pain. And then there's the part about habits, right? About the realization that if you've learned to do something in a particular way that might be painful, it can also be unlearned. And working with the mind to find out how you can do things not habitually, but to move in and be in ways that you intended. So one person said, it's sort of learning self-care right along with learning all the movements, that the ideas about how to care for yourself are embedded in the movement practices, in the lessons. Another theme, important theme, was that changing perceptions about the relationship between body and mind, right? Learning to listen to the body, even if they didn't want to listen to the body because of pain or whatever. Developing a sense of space, of internal space, of having less internal clutter, and a shift in the relationship of the mind and the brain to movement, that there's less a sense of control and more a sense of the brain or the mind being diffused through the body. So maybe you learn to get out of the way of your body, or maybe there's this through movement, this sense of really mind-body integration. One of the surprising findings was that, Feldenkrais method, we don't particularly focus on relaxation as a goal, and yet, interestingly, lots of people mentioned this experience of calming, and I think perhaps calming was the word that was used frequently because it can include both the mental and physical aspects. Both can be quite prominent in the idea of calming. And in fact, as you can see with the third person there, they felt they had an experience of not being physically stressed through the practice of the Feldenkrais. The calming contributed to the reduction of pain, and when the mind is busy with the attention, as in meditation, when the mind is busy with attention to the bodily experiences of movement, then that contributes to calm. Many people also reported about sleep and about this experience of knowing how to settle, which also has a somatic component. So one person said, doing Feldenkrais, I actually know that there's a place that is really calm. That is really important, a little pool of calm for me. And the final meta theme was what was hinted in the original research question, like people seem to have experiences of the method that involve larger parts of their sense of themselves and well-being. So seeing themselves in a new way, living inside their body in a new way, feeling comfortable in their body, without all the crap. A sense of a physical embodiment of being at one with oneself. And even some awareness of the pre-conscious aspects of doing the practices, that habitual patterns are worked on without even knowing that they're habitual patterns. You just start to change the way you move, and then you experience something different and something shift that's in your being. So that's a quick tour of some of the many expressions of people's experience of those 6 themes. How am I doing on time, April?
You've got at least another 8 or 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. Very good. Very good. So, looking at the phenomenological literature, particularly transcendental phenomenology, there's also this idea of, can one, when looking experience, get to what are essential constituents of the experience? And structure is a word that doesn't go down well in the Feldenkrais world. We're thinking of things as always being dynamic and whatever. And then I realized, things like Feldenkrais lessons, they have a structure, and it's a structure of movement in time. And I think there will be ways to study some of the finer experiences of, being aware of yourself as you move using something like microphenomenology. But for this study, looking at people's overall experience, I realized there were some elements of the experience that were really essential to what constituted the whole experience for this group of people who shared their experience with me. These included they're kind of step-like and time-related, but the experience of coming to the method with pain, but also feeling very discombobulated, very out of touch. People used the language out of touch a lot when they talked about coming to the method. That the experience of improvement was essential, that gave them some hope and some sense that the Feldenkrais method was going to work for them. That there was a positive affect that went with the practice, that they felt good and it influenced their mood. But then that they had to find out how to take care of themselves, how to move in ways that wasn't triggering the pain, that wasn't fatiguing them, that they could rest when they needed to rest. There's actually a paper on about the Feldenkrais about, learning to rest when you need to rest. So having that toolkits of how to take care of yourself, your embodied self, when you're dealing with pain. And then this sense of a sense that they could do things to alter their experience of their body, to alter their movement, to alter their pain, to alter their mood, to alter their sleeping. And it fits well with the phenomenological literature, because Husserl talked about, before the I am, as in I think therefore I am, Husserl the founder of phenomenology, talked about the I can, that we can do things. And even before that I move, that the foundation of really a human experience is in this ability to move and to do things. And then that was picked up by people like Merleau-Ponty. So the interesting thing is with phenomenology is you don't do a keyword search to look for themes, right? You're always looking for the meaning of what people are saying in the context of what they're saying in the utterance. And yet after I finished my data analysis, I went back and did a keyword search on all of the original texts from the participants, and I can just was everywhere. There were hundreds of you. I can help myself sleep. I can get out of pain. I can get out of the chair better, right, etc. It's like the sense of I can kind of pervaded the texts. And then finally, that sets a ground for continuing their practice in their life, formally doing Feldenkrais, or just bringing the awareness into their everyday life. So that allowed me to come up with this description of the method based on my research, that the experience of Feldenkrais method is this experience of self-caring. And so Feldenkrais method is experienced both as a form of self-caring and a source of self-care skills and practices. Experience improvement creates a mood of a sense of possibility. Through experimenting with qualities of movement and kinds of attention, the student discovers how to move in ways that are safe and less painful, and more comfortable and pleasurable, and evoke felt qualities of, for example, comfort, ease, fluidity, and integration. This creates a sense of I can and provides a basis for continuing practice in life. That's the kind of one paragraph summation of my results. Oops. So the significance of the results, with this small qualitative study that's consistent with other kinds of studies and other qualitative studies, that Feldenkrais seems to help people with their experience of pain, and particularly getting greater control over pain and greater function. But importantly, the method's not only about pain and movement and function, but it's about improvements in self-care and self-image and mood, calming and a sense of hope. and feelings of well-being, of ease and fluidity, integration, and the I can, terms we use in health science, right, are efficacy, agency, coherence, right, depending on which theorist you're using, and leading to these changed feelings of being and feelings of well-being. And I think so many of the practices that we have brought into mind-body medicine have this component of possibility. They are really give people a lot of relief, but if they're adopted as practices, can lead to alterations in the whole of people's lives, to some degree of transcendence or some, altered sense of themselves and their life possibilities. There's the skill part of and the values part, that the movement with awareness can lead people to have skills in self-observation, to identify what their values are as they embody them in action, which are important for self-care and mindfulness. And I think the findings are relevant to other mindful movement practices, like I said, Alexander technique and yoga and walking meditation and mindfulness. There's maybe possibilities for joint teaching and research. And I think, I mentioned microphenomenology, going to these very detailed moment-to-moment aspects of moment-to-moment of developing awareness and developing metacognition and learning how to shift one's experience. I think there's really a lot of overlap there in a number of mind-body practices. And the one, that suggests itself to me from the study was the role of imagined movements, which also goes over into guided imagery and hypnosis. In fact, if you think about it, so many guided imagery practices involve physically going on a journey, right? You climb the mountain, you physically move and relocate yourself in your guided imagery practice. So, in my professional life, doing the study really tuned me into these wider and deeper meanings of the practice in people's lives. I knew it was there, but to really hear what I shared with you today from people about the experience was really profound and influenced my work as a practitioner. It's given me confidence in presenting myself as a scholar and an expert. It really makes a difference in the scholarly world to be able to say PhD. It led to teaching opportunities here and at San Francisco State. And, I'm the editor of the Feldenkrais Research Journal. And again, it gives me a whole lot of skills, a lot of being a journal editor in a professional journal where I'm just not choosing articles, but I'm really working with the scholar practitioners in developing their ideas, mentoring them and supporting them and helping them edit their works. The skills I got from doing a dissertation and the understandings of how to understand things were really, really important part of my professional life. So I'm very lucky to have 2/3 of my dissertation committee here. Dr. Don Moss, who is my chair, and Dr. Luann Fortune, who is one of the members of my committee and methodologist. And then the third member was Susan Hillier, who's a Feldenkrais trainer and a professor of rehabilitation and neuroscience in South Australia. I had a support group of a couple of my fellow students, and I couldn't have done this without the enormous support of my partner, Dr. Deborah Bose. And that's my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.